Rain and some of it heavy moving through the northeast and mid-Atlantic states, and some snow up in northern New England. There were a few flakes flying in places not too far away when the precip started today. Also, our weather is nice in the west. I had some rain, which is a miracle in and of itself. We will talk about that and Thanksgiving and the weekend and the long range and anything else you want to talk about. And that's tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show on the 21st of November, brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, Joe, and what happens if you do?
You will get 10% off.
No.
No. See, I was correcting myself.
Yes.
You didn't even give me a chance.
I'm sorry.
You have to use the magic words, I want a weather station.
No. If you get the Tempest weather station, you join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet.
Yes.
Okay. And the link is pinned at the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And if you use the coupon code...
Yeah? What are you going to get?
Give them the coupon code.
Oh, you mean I want a weather station?
Yeah, that's the one.
I want a weather station, ladies and gentlemen. I demand it. Well, actually, I already have a weather station, but if I didn't, I would certainly go to Tempest and get one. And if I were to go to Tempest to get a weather station, guess what? I will get 10% off the price if I say I want a weather station. So there you go.
That's it. Or on anything else that you may purchase.
Anything else. Yes.
And Tempest is an affiliate of the Joe and Joe Weather Show.
I mean, suppose tonight, with those southeasterly winds gusting to maybe 40 miles an hour, for whatever reason, although actually, I don't think the Tempest weather station has the standard...
it does it digitally.
It does it digitally.
Yes.
I'm going to say, if you lost your arrow or one of your cups on your anemometer...
Well, you never want to lose one of your cups, Joe.
Right. And if you wanted to replace them, you just can get it at Tempest and use those magic words and get 10% off. So, anyway.
Yes. If only. Okay. Welcome to everybody tonight on watching the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Our friends on the chat board are all here ready to go. And, of course, there are always those that don't join in on the conversation. Please join in on the conversation. We don't bite. Just subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you won't miss the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. and Fridays and Saturdays we're off unless there's a storm around. And of course, turn your notifications on just in case. We will not be on this Thursday, Thanksgiving Day. So the next after tomorrow, the next Joe and Joe Weather Show will be Sunday at 7:35 p.m. So by that time, you will have digested everything.
Yes.
So I woke up this morning expecting that it would be raining, and it wasn't. And I looked at the radar, and there was this giant hole. It was huge, though. It was covering much of north of Atlanta to about me. Now, it was raining north of me. It was raining northwest of me, northeast of me, southeast and south. But it was about I would say maybe 100-mile diameter that there was this big hole. So we got all of 500ths last night. So finally, though, around midday, the rain picked up, and it did rain heavily this afternoon. I don't know what I got in total. I don't know if it was an inch. It was probably less than that, but might be close. I'll have to check. I haven't checked my mobile device yet to see what my Tempest weather station has said I got. So, and anyway, you're raining or should be raining.
Well, it is, and we've got about 0.2 of an inch already in the rain bucket, and that's only the beginning because it looks like, Joe, from my vantage point, we're going to pick up at least an inch to maybe 1.75 inches of rainfall. And there are some spots that may pick up even more, but the heaviest will be coming our way in the after midnight hours tonight. So it's raining now, but the worst of it comes when most of it should be tucked in our beds asleep, unless you happen to be one of those people who have to get up in the wee hours of the morning and go to work, which you and I both can empathize with.
Did you? Yes. Did you see any sleet at the start or any wet snowflakes?
I did not. However, my daughter, who lives in Ulster County in the lovely town of New Paltz, or if you take a look and take a first glance at this town on a piece of paper, you might say New Platts, but no, New Paltz. She actually did have snow, and it accumulated slightly on the grass and on her lawn. She took a couple of pictures, passed them along to Renata, and Renata tried to send them to me so that I could show on the show tonight. But you know, these wonderful iPhones that you are so big a fan of, Joe, and
I'm not a fan. I don't have an iPhone.
you
I
don't have an iPhone.
No, I do not have an iPhone.
But why did you you make fun of me when I say that Joe Rayo still uses a rotary phone.
Oh no, I have an Android. I don't have an iPhone. I have an Android.
But can you take a picture with that or
Yes, it's
all right.
you know
But to make a long story short,
uh,
we invested a goodly sum of money on these devices, and the bottom line of it is that more often than not, I cannot when somebody sends me something, or if I try to send somebody something like a picture or a photograph, it don't work, and it didn't work tonight. So unfortunately, I cannot show you the lovely photographs that my daughter took of the snow in New Paltz because they're out somewhere in cyberspace, and I don't know
I can't
if
imagine why sometimes when folks with iPhones send me pictures or videos, they occasionally take a long time to
Oh,
download to
I'll
my
eventually get
phone.
these pictures. I'll get these photos probably anytime between right now and next Thursday. And I'm not talking about Thursday Thanksgiving. I'm talking about a week from
Well, did
Thursday.
she text them to you or she emailed them to you?
She emailed them to me,
That's, and you can and the excuse me, and they're not on the email.
and she sent it apparently to both my AOL address and also my Gmail address,
And you got nothing.
and I've got nothing, nothing, ladies and
Not
gentlemen.
not a flake, not an ice pellet, nothing.
Exactly. But I go, just take my word. It was snowing a couple hours ago. It probably now has changed over, I would assume, because the temperatures are going to be slowly going up tonight. By daybreak tomorrow morning, at least here where I am, I'm expecting temperatures no lower than 42 and maybe as high as 45, 46. Heading for a high tomorrow, Joe, in the mid, maybe even the upper 50s, which will feel so nice because I was outside doing yard work and other stuff today with the wife, and it was like low 40s, and my fingers were getting numb.
How?
Uh,
Yeah, as you get older,
yeah,
you get number faster.
yes.
How cold were you this
Numb's
morning?
the word. What?
How cold were you this morning?
Oh, the coldest we've been so far, 24.
Okay, so you still haven't beaten me yet. 21-2.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. The chairman Scott Briller, Joe, the first hit the tip jar tonight. The biggest snowfall in Central Park in New York City on Thanksgiving Day, 4.4 inches on November 23rd, 1989. And I remember,
Quiet John, by the way, was on the chat board tonight. Quiet John says a few flakes in Astoria.
yeah, I had a couple of people message me from the Bronx that said that they saw a few flakes in there too, in the Fordham section. So, um, yeah, they were around. I mean, it was certainly, that big high to the north. There was a lot of low-level cold air, so I guess it must have been just enough little evaporational cooling, and voila, or as they say, voila.
Yes.
All right, you've got radars tonight, so you could go ahead and do your thing.
All right. Well, let's indeed do it.
David Carter said he got down to 20 in Bethel, Connecticut, just before 7 a.m. And a few people on the chat board reporting that it is raining right now wherever they happen to be, uh, etc. So go ahead, whenever you're ready, just go ahead.
Oh, I'm ready, and here it is. This is the view from our friends at the National Weather Service in New York City. Even though they're not in New York City, they're about 100 miles to the east in the community of Upton. not too far from Brookhaven Labs, and you can see that a broad area of rain has now moved in and over the tri-state region. The green, that corresponds to, I guess, light to moderate, and there are some areas of yellow, which would be moderate rainfall. And again, depending upon where you are, it's either lightly raining or coming down at a moderate clip. And we may see before the night is over some moderate to heavy rain, especially in the after midnight hours. And that's when we're expecting the brunt of the storm to move on through. And when it's all over said and done, most areas probably, Joe, will have at least an inch and a half and maybe as much as an inch and 3/4 or 2 inches of rain across their neighborhood. And the good news is that after a brief period of rain tomorrow morning, we're only going to pick up maybe a couple of tenths of an inch after sunrise. The rain will end. We may get some breaks of sun in the afternoon, and the temperatures tomorrow likely will rebound up into the mid and maybe even the upper 50s. Oh, by the way, as I mentioned a few moments ago, the wind southeasterly tonight, gusting at times to over 30, maybe even up to 40 miles an hour. So it will be not just rain, at times it'll be a windswept rain out there. So if you still have any leaves on the trees, I hope you wave goodbye to them because they ain't going to last very long. Probably between the rain and the wind, most, if not all of them, will be on the ground tomorrow afternoon. Now, that's New York. Let's take a look at some other localities. We'll go down to how about Philadelphia? Philadelphia right now, seeing pretty much the same thing. A large swath of light rain with some areas of yellow indicating moderate rain, especially over southeastern Pennsylvania, around Amish country. That's where they're getting the worst of this right now. But again, notice the movement. The movement is from west-southwest to east-northeast. And so with that movement, it looks like much of the immediate tri-state area will be getting into those heavier bands or heavier clusters of rain later on in the evening hours tonight, as per schedule. Let's go north and east up toward Boston, see if the rain has reached them yet. And no, in Boston, actually not Boston, but Taunton is where the radar is located. You could see it's advancing on Rhode Island and eastern Massachusetts. Not raining there yet, but it will be arriving there probably, I would have to say within the next 2 or 3 hours. The rain will be arriving in the Boston area and maybe another 4 hours by the time it gets to Cape Cod. And again, up in this area here in Vermont and New Hampshire, it's probably cold enough so that they're going to see not rain but snow. And in fact, in the high elevations of the Green and White Mountains, you may see perhaps anywhere from 4 to maybe 6, maybe even as much as 8 inches of snow. We're talking about Mount Washington. The computer models on Sunday were suggesting maybe something like 20 inches of snow for them. Then they cut that in half yesterday and went to only 10. I'm not sure if they cut back a little bit more, but certainly they will see significant snows up across portions of central and especially northern New England over the next 24 hours or so. Let's see, where else could we go, Joe? Let's
see
let's
if you can get a radar station. I know they don't have any Canadian stations on there, but if you could get one that is kind of close to Toronto.
Okay. The only one that possibly could fit that bill would be Buffalo. And here you see Buffalo does have precipitation, and it looks like to be mostly light precipitation. Looks like the heaviest stuff is moving off to the east-northeast. Is there any reason why you wanted to see Toronto, Joe?
Well, Broccoli Tornado on the chat board asked for that.
Oh, okay. I love that. Broccoli Tornado. All right. So there you go. I hope you're happy. This is again as good as we can get for someplace near to the Toronto area. Toronto is up here. Here's Hamilton, Ontario here. Niagara Falls and Buffalo also in the general area here. So for all intents and purposes, Joe, if it's not already raining or snowing in the Northeast, it will be in the coming hours.
All right, so I'll go to the wide radar shot, and we'll take a look from that angle, and you can see it here. This actually does reach back. I guess they do pick up some of the echoes that go on the other side there, on the Canadian side. Doesn't look like there's much. There's some stuff in eastern Michigan, and it gets scattered when it goes on the Canada side. But meanwhile, when you look at the area that's moving through the Northeast, it's a fairly it's pretty large. I mean, it goes back down. There's some heavy rains in central PA, down into central Maryland and northern Virginia, and also in southwestern Virginia. Some good news is in that the areas that are suffering from very dry conditions in western Virginia, western North Carolina, northern South Carolina, picked up some decent rains out of this. And in fact, there's a snaking line of thunderstorms that earlier set up near Atlanta on the northern fringe, and now that's kind of extended northward into North Carolina, goes through northwestern South Carolina, southwestward from there. That line is south of Atlanta now, and then goes all the way down into Alabama. In fact, in southeast Alabama, we have a tornado warning that's up at the moment, and that line snakes down into the Florida Panhandle. And then you got to go all the way up to the Pacific Northwest, where we've got some rain coming in to Washington State. There's some heavy rain just offshore, and that's with another weather system that is out in the Pacific. But this is what it looks like on the full U.S. satellite view, loaded with moisture. Yeah, you don't have, Joe, like you kind of see there's a little slight rotation that's sort of back in Michigan. I guess that's with the primary low that's going up there. But this is going to be one of those primary secondary where the secondary is actually going to form very close to New York City. And sometimes when that happens, that point where that low forms, what we would call the point of occlusion on the front, that's where the cold front, warm front, and occluded front meet. If you get under that in a situation like this where you got the surface low strengthening, that's when you could get a burst of heavy rain, a little cluster of heavy rain, and maybe even a rumble or two of thunder as it goes by. The triple point, correct.
Yeah, yeah. And again, even though we have not been, according to SPC, the Storm Prediction Center, in the zone for even general thunderstorm coverage, it's not out of the question that in what Joe just described, in that case, we could pick up a renegade rumble or two of thunder or flash of lightning as the lift, the forcing of the atmosphere, so to speak, is enough to produce a little bit of convective activity. Quiet John is asking Joe about, and by the way, thank you very much, Quiet John. He has hit the tip jar.
Yes, thank you, John. Thank you.
As well as the chairman, asking about Broadheadsville, Pennsylvania. That's in northeastern Pennsylvania. I believe that's Monroe County in the Pocono region about this weekend. And from what it looks like, Joe, I think sunny to partly cloudy for Black Friday, and the breeze will pick up a bit, and temperatures will still be not too bad, upper 40s to near 50. But then on Saturday, you talk about cold, unseasonably cold. I think on Saturday, we may have a tough time breaking 40 degrees. This despite the fact that we'll have kind of a blend or mix of cloud and sunshine. And then on Sunday, for everybody heading back to wherever they went for the Thanksgiving holiday, sun gives way to clouds. And I think now in Broadheadsville, which is further west of the tri-state area in the Hudson Valley, by late in the day on Sunday, there could be some light rain. However, it could also start, at least in the hillier areas, and this would go for a place like Broadheadsville, it could start off as a little bit of sleet or wet snow initially. It won't stay that way, but kind of like what they saw in New Paltz earlier today, a little bit of frozen precip maybe, and then the precip will change over to plain rain. Temperatures are going to be in the low 40s on Sunday, and then they'll be hovering precariously close to the freezing mark, but probably just above freezing for most of the night on Sunday night.
SPC has a marginal risk tonight all the way up to the southern portion of the Delmarva Peninsula and then all the way south through the Carolinas and Georgia, central and south Georgia. Then there's a small area of slight risk in southwest Georgia into southeast Alabama and into the Florida Panhandle. And that's kind of is reflected what we saw on the radar with that line of storms and the tornado warning that popped up in southeast Alabama. And then for tomorrow, there's probably going to be residual risk left in easternmost North Carolina from this as the front gets hung up slightly in that region. But the rest of the country, nothing as far as convective activity is concerned, and no thunderstorms. I like when they have that no thunderstorms forecast splashed right across the entire United States for Thursday into Friday. WPC's 5-day rainfall forecast. So this goes through Sunday evening, so that probably doesn't really, there's not much that's going to be there through Sunday afternoon at least.
I think
But
what you're seeing on that map right there, highly front loaded, which includes
yeah,
what we're going through tonight.
1.5 inches plus. Much of eastern PA, almost all of New Jersey, except for a small sliver in northwest Jersey. I don't know why they did that. You see how they have that purple splotch over there in northeast PA?
Yeah.
And then there's a little gap where no, it's going to be less than an inch and a half, but more than an inch and a quarter. And then it goes back up to an inch and a half. I mean, that's probably just a handful of miles that they squeezed in there. But southernmost Connecticut, Rhode Island, Long Island, I think there probably will be a couple of spots. I'm sure we'll see a couple of spots that get as much as 2. Eastern North Carolina, uh, inch and a half plus on top of what was already fallen, a half inch to an inch and a half from west to east across Virginia. North Carolina kind of lessens a bit now in South Carolina and into South Georgia. I got, by the way, I went and checked 0.87 was my rainfall, and that's the most rain here that we have received since late last August, when I think I got like 2.5 inches here, but in town, which is only about 10 miles away, they got 7 inches of rain, and the rivers flooded and overflowed, and it was a mess. Not a whole lot of precip everywhere else. So you see some in the Gulf states, quarter to a half, up the plains, the central plains, and in through the central and northern Rockies, and of course some of that. Much of that may wind up being snow in the central and northern Rockies. Some places a half to 3/4 of an inch of liquid, then it tails off a bit and picks up again up in the Pacific Northwest. And speaking of snow, we can take a look at what WPC on their latest forecast that we have from them, and this really hasn't changed very much in the Northeast since yesterday. Uh, and this is all from the system tonight. This is for the next 72 hours. Probability of at least 2. And the salmon color is 80% or higher. I like to use the light blue, the lighter blue, not the darkest blue, but the next shade lighter at 50%. That's probably a pretty good bet that they'll get the 2 inches in that 50% zone. So is it 2 inches? And then you've got the probabilities going way up when you go to northeastern New Hampshire and across into interior Maine. As far as higher amounts are concerned, I'll switch to the probability of at least 4, and that is mainly in northeastern New Hampshire, 50% or higher, and even a few spots, long stretch there in interior Maine, where it's 80% or higher for at least 4. And of course, you see that also extends into southeastern Canada, including Montreal. Now we'll go out west because this is for later Thursday into Friday. And now again, that's just the probability of at least 4 over Wyoming. Fairly high probabilities there, extending into northern Colorado. I'll just back off to 2 so we could see the larger area of 2 inches, and that extends into western Nebraska, much of the northern half of Colorado with a 50% or more chance for at least 2, into northeastern Utah, much of southern Idaho, and on up into western Montana. I don't think anybody's going to get 12. Oh, there's a small area there where they've got probabilities of up to 20 to 30% chances in those dark green spots in Wyoming and in south central Montana, where there's the 20 to 30% chance for at least 12. And I guess we could look at the long range and see what they're doing with this. So the first day is Friday into Saturday. And there you have it. For Friday into Saturday, the same, the western half of Colorado, some areas between 70 and 90% for at least 3. So that's on top of the other 2 inches you just saw, and a 40% chance, 30 to 50% chance, I should say, in southwest Nebraska, extreme northeastern Colorado, extreme northwestern Kansas for a few inches. Sunday, it moves over the area. Part of it stays back in the western part of Colorado, but then the eastern part, you have a large area of 10 to 30 and a area of 50 to 70 in central Kansas. And that is Saturday into Sunday. Sunday into Monday, uh, again, western Colorado. They're going to be getting quite a bit there. I guess they've got a upslope going on that's just going to be going on for days there. So that's good for the snow lovers there. And then also a 10 to 30 to 30 to 50% chance in that darker green in southwest Nebraska. And then Monday into Tuesday uh, doesn't do much. Why is it not changing? Come on, change. Sunday. All right, the map's kind of acting a little weird here, so we'll just leave it at that. And what else left? Okay. Why don't I get the weather service? Let's see what on the digital forecast that they're going for in the Northeast. Shall we?
Surely, I got the CPC Climate Prediction Center 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day precipitation.
All right. All right. You stand by for that. I'll switch you in 1 second. I just want to get this snow forecast that they have up here from the Weather Service digital forecast. And let's just switch that up. And I'll make it a little bit bigger. Usually I have these maps up prepared ahead of time, but sometimes they update them right before the show goes on the air.
In case any of you are wondering where Renata is, she's like 1 minute before our show started, the phone rang, and it ended up being her cousin calling from Kentucky. So she's been on the phone talking to Kentucky for the last 35 minutes. So knowing Renata and knowing how she loves to talk with her cousin, you may miss the show entirely tonight. So.
Oh, okay. And there's the snowfall forecast amounts: 1 to 4 inches in the Adirondacks, 1 to 3 across Vermont, 2 to 4, 2 to 5 across New Hampshire, particularly in the central part of the state. I think that 9 that's there is probably Mount Washington, and a large area of 4 inches plus up in Maine. So let's check to see what kind of advisories we have up. And we've got winter weather advisories up for northern New York, just about all of Vermont except the Northwest, central and northern New Hampshire, and that interior area in Maine. In the west, we have winter storm watches up for much of central and northern Wyoming and into southern Montana, and winter weather advisories going further north into Montana and then south into Idaho. And there's also some watches up for a couple of counties in western Wyoming. So there's where your winter weather is. And now let's see what CPC has made of all of this. They've been the subject of conversation lately.
Well, the 6 to 10 day outlook, which begins next Monday, the 27th of November, and extends out to the 1st of December. My goodness, where is this year going? I can tell you one thing: this 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook is very dry. I would have to say at least 80% of the country is underneath below normal probability for precipitation, which includes much of the Northeast. The gray zones, which cover central and eastern New England, is for normal precipitation amounts. and this thin strip here across the Carolinas down into north central Louisiana and then out to the desert Southwest is for near normal. The only places that are going to be above normal, probability wise, for precip, it looks to be central and southern Texas, and also across the swath of the southeastern states from about Atlanta on south, with Florida particularly in line for above normal. But even more so, if we look at the 49th and 50th states, much needed rainfall, maybe. I think I made note of this about a week ago when we were talking about Hawaii. And I said, well, it's going to be a while, but about a week or so down the road, they may get into a pattern where they may actually begin to see more of a showery type of weather pattern, which is what they desperately need, because Hawaii has been in very dry conditions for a long, long time as we go back to that situation, that sad situation that happened in July. And also in wetter than normal conditions is Alaska, especially southern and south central Alaska for above normal precip. Now, if we look for the 8 to 14 day outlook in terms of precipitation, we see that once again, most of the country, well, I'd say more like 70%, 65 or 70% will be below normal in terms of probability. But now we're seeing above normal probabilities for California, southern sections of Arizona and New Mexico, still above normal across much of Texas and across the southeastern states, and again, above normal in Florida. Still a bit above normal or leaning above normal for Hawaii. Again, that's good news for them. And also above normal precipitation wise, which could very well be snow in Alaska. So it would appear, Joe, at least in the northeastern part of the country, and this again runs from the 29th through the 5th of December, once we get past tomorrow, or actually tonight into early tomorrow, we may not see, if these forecasts are correct, we may not see very much in the way of precipitation here in the tri-state area and much of the Northeast, maybe right on into perhaps the first week of December. So drier than normal conditions, which I know all the snow lovers out there are probably beating their heads against the wall.
Well,
saying,
it
well, what is
depends.
this?
Look, it depends, because if you look at some of the snowier months that we've had, and then you look at the total precipitation, particularly when you get into January and February, and you look at the precipitation amounts, a lot of those months wind up with below normal precipitation. So it doesn't necessarily correlate that just because it says below normal precipitation. It probably implies more, I think, that, well, what did they do anything with temperatures?
Temperature-wise, they
I mean,
have
you can show that.
it's still above normal here in our part of the country, but a push toward below normal readings.
Can you put the maps up?
Well, yes, I can do that. I thought for a change, I'm always showing the temperature map. I thought tonight for a change of
No,
pace.
usually you show both.
I understand that. I understand. So what we're going to do is
I'm just trying to help. I'm just trying to help you do television, Joe.
To appease to appease all of the folks who want to see the temperatures, I will indeed share the screen again, and I will show you what the temperatures look like. Here you can see, again, a rather significant area below normal in the Ohio Valley. This is, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's a 70 to 80% probability of below normal temperatures from the 27th of November to December 1st. You can see that we are in that area of below normal, although not quite as extreme. But notice, if you will, the area of above normal rimming the northern plains and Pacific Northwest and along the Pacific coast. Now watch what happens between 6 to 10.
Look at Alaska in red.
Yes, look at that. Yeah, that's
well,
that's
you want, if it's usually usually if it's cold in the east, you want Alaska to be above normal temperature wise.
Correct. Notice, if you will, though, that for the 8 to 14 day, the area of above normal, which was pinned or hemmed in to the extreme northern plain states and extreme west, is now beginning to expand more rapidly into as far as the western Great Lakes. Now, if you recall, the 3 to 4 week outlook that was put out last Friday by NOAA, by the Climate Prediction Center, had much of the northern and central United States basking in above normal temperatures. So if you continue this trend, if you extrapolate, you might very well see that perhaps by the 7th or 8th of December, that area of above normal may actually reach all the way over to our neck of the woods. We'll see. I'm hoping that that'll be the case because I'm looking for warmer than normal, or at least balmy.
You're looking for a window to put up those darn lights of yours.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Hey, it's no fun. It's no fun putting those lights up when it's like 25 or 30 degrees, and even with gloves, my fingers start to feel like wooden, if you will. So,
Well, the window of this 8 to 14 day goes in somewhat to that prior forecast from last week on the 3 to 4 week.
right.
Correct?
Correct.
So clearly they watched they watched the criticism that was heaped upon them right here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, and backed away from the painting the entire nation as above normal.
29th of November to the 5th of December. Here you see the map for the Northeast, which indicates leaning, not likely, but leaning toward below normal still in our part of the country, the Northeast. But again, that's only through the 5th of December. After that, you can see the normal temperature area approaching from the central Great Lakes. And that may eventually mean, again, by the second week of December, we may be seeing a warm up. Maybe.
Then again, maybe not. We'll see.
Yeah.
Want to just point out a couple of things going forwards that we're going to be paying attention to, and of course, the fans of the polar vortex in the stratosphere are applauding now. They're giving a standing ovation that I have the map up, and if you watch this loop, and I'll get the date for you here. This is this picture starts on Sunday night. Okay, I got to take the date out because I want everybody to see what happens here. So, the polar vortex is centered, looks like just northwest of the North Pole, closer to Siberia than to Greenland, and it's kind of stretched out in a trough that goes down into eastern Canada. But up in Siberia, you'll notice darker browns showing up, but that's warm air, and this could be this is a sign that at least the model is picking up on what could be a stratospheric warming event that may occur during the first couple of weeks of December. We'll have to see how this evolves. Maybe that leads to a split in the vortex, which oftentimes can be bullish for winter weather in the eastern part of the United States, but that's never a guarantee. There are instances where everything in the stratosphere happens the way you want it to happen, and it never couples down to the surface. So yeah, you have to use this cautiously, but nonetheless, there is a sign, some signs that there might be a stratospheric warming event coming during the first part of the month of December. So there's that. And as far as the overall pattern, of course, it always depends on what runs you look at. And Jesus, what time frame is this? Okay, that's way out.
I remember, by the
But
way, don't mean to interrupt, but I remember back in the day, I used to, this goes back in the 1970s. Some of you may be acquainted with the time signal station, formerly from the National Bureau of Standards. Now it's the Institute of Standards and Technology, WWV. And they provide time signals, accurate time. They run an atomic clock on short wave. And I think it periodically, at the time, I think it was 18 minutes past the hour, they gave information on sunspots, solar flares, and they would also sometimes indicate, they called it a stratwarm alert, stratospheric warming. And I always got excited when they made that announcement that there's a stratwarm alert, because to me, that meant that stratospheric warming was taking place up near the polar regions. And it also meant, at least to me, that there was going to be a displacement of very cold air over the polar regions, which may conceivably move southward and move into my neck of the woods in about a week or so. And more times than not, that usually was the case. It doesn't always mean that colder air is heading our way after a stratospheric warming event, but it's interesting that, as Joe just pointed out, there may be some stratospheric warming taking place over Siberia. And maybe, just maybe, that might mean that mid or late December, we might see some significant cooling here in the Northeast or in the eastern United States. We'll have to wait and see.
Could be. We pointed out yesterday that the Arctic Oscillation was supposed to go to almost 2 standard deviations. That was
What happened?
yesterday. Well, now today, it just gets up to you've got a lot of members that go above and below, and then the mean is right along the middle. So it seems like it's either going to be way positive or way negative, depending on which of the which of the members you look at. And when you average it out, it straddles the neutral line. It goes a little bit positive. Let me just look at the NAO for a moment. Let's take a look at that.
Before you do that, Cecilia Hernandez on the chat board said, Joe Rayo, I thought you hated cold air. Well, Cecilia, what I mentioned WWV, and when I used to listen on shortwave radio, that was the 1970s. I was a big snow and winter weather fan back then. I waited for the to see a big snowfall, a big snowstorm. I lived in the Bronx back then, and that was a very exciting time. Dynamic meteorology. I am considerably older now, and I have a very long driveway, which I don't particularly care to shovel or snow blow when it does snow, and when it does get very cold. I hate cold weather now. So when I speak of how excited I was, when I heard Stratwarm alerts back in the 70s, again, that was like 50 years ago. It's 50 years later now, and I've mellowed, and now my idea
or hardened.
Or hardened. And you stay out in the cold long enough, you do get frozen and hardened. So
yep.
Anyway, it's a different story with me now as opposed to back in the day. And I can also point out that Mr. Cioffi was also a big fan of cold and snow. We used to sit by when I was working at a private weather office back in the late 70s. I mean, Joe would frequently visit because it was like his only chance to see any weather maps coming over our fax machines. And the two of us were like, come on, can't we get an outbreak of cold weather? Come on, when are we going to get a storm that's going to match up with that cold air? And
those were very lean years.
Yes, exactly.
They were very lean years.
The 70s were very lean indeed.
Yes. The NAO is going positive now, going neutral, then it goes positive, but not by a lot. We still seem to be in this zone where the teleconnections are just a little bit above neutral or a little bit below neutral, but no big deal. But you deal with what you deal with. But we'll see, because then again, that's the 0Z, and if they ran one for the 12Z, you probably would come up with something different, because some of these model runs like to put troughs in the west at the end of the forecast period, and then it goes back to putting a trough in the east. So it depends on what runs you look at. So I've got the 18Z run out, for example. So of course, we're dealing with what we're dealing with tonight, and that is this shortwave. That, wait a minute, why does this not look right to me? What do I have up? Oh, I have the right. This is the 12Z. Okay. So this is today. So here's our trough that's moving east. The southern part of the trough has a little cutoff there in North Carolina, so that goes out Wednesday night and moves away. And then as we go forward, this is just, I don't know, something doesn't look right to me. But anyway, as we go forward for Friday, you've got a trough swinging through eastern Canada. That starts to bleed down cold air. We do have a connection there that comes up from northern Canada down toward Lake Winnipeg and then swings eastward into eastern Canada. Then as we move into early next week, a bit more of a stronger trough swings into the east early next week. And so, as you said, Joe, it'll probably get cold it's going to get cold Saturday. But then there's reinforcement that comes behind it for much of next week. Much of next week, I think, is going to be on the cold side with a deep trough in the east. But the problem is it's broad, and the trough axis is sort of near or just off the coast when it pins up and around. So you really can't get much precip in setups like this. And there is a little diver here that comes down uh, at some point, maybe next weekend. But we'll have to see how models handle that. And you can see that sort of pivoting around. And then as that lifts up, we get into a little bit of ridging because a more important trough comes into the plains and into the upper, into Minnesota. You see it there. So now suddenly there's like ridges on both coasts and a trough in the middle at the end of the forecast period. That was the 12Z run. So let's look at the 18Z and see what that has to say. And I'll just roll this back, and then I'll show you that diver I'm talking about. So, here's our trough for today. The southern part of it goes out underneath us tonight, tomorrow night into early Thursday, gets kicked away. The Canadian trough swings around to start bringing colder air in for the weekend, followed by a stronger trough that comes in Sunday night and Monday with cold air reinforcement. And again, later Sunday night is that arm swings across the Great Lakes and into New England. The chance that we could see some precipitation, probably mostly rain, maybe some snow further north. And then that goes out. And then troughing dominates the eastern part of the United States for much of next week, right through Friday. And right in here, Joe, I don't know if you saw it on this one. Now, it may be gone on the next run. There's a kink there in the western Great Lakes. And then when we get to Thursday, there's this north-south trough that's swinging through Pennsylvania down to Georgia. And the models do try to make a little low that forms out offshore and goes out, but the trough axis is too far east for it to be of anything of consequence. But I just want to keep an eye on that. If subsequent runs start dropping it further west, we'll have to see. And then after that goes out, now we're into December 2nd and 3rd. The trough in the east, well, it still kind of hangs in there. Part of it pulls out, and then another trough drops in. And you see how on this run it's totally different at the end of the period. It's instead of having ridges on both coasts and troughs in the middle, a trough in the middle, you got a ridge in the west and more toward the Rockies, and you got troughing back in the eastern part of the United States. And you also have an upper high that's building up of the Atlantic over the top in Greenland. So this would suggest that much of the time over the next 2 weeks, through at least the 7th of December, we're going to be dealing with colder than normal temperatures. Now, whether it comes with anything precip-wise remains to be seen. And we'll just run real quick through the surface here so we can get to Briller Jeopardy. Because after this storm goes by, there's nothing really major to look ahead to.
I wish I knew. I wish I knew. I know I'm going to mispronounce this, and I apologize in advance. On the chat board, we have Tobes Navojagu. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And he writes that this El Nino peaks at 1.7, especially in 3 weeks, and then weakens rapidly for the rest of the winter. Now, that's exactly what Bill Kirk at Weather Trends 360 has been saying since the beginning of fall. And also, we had about a month ago, Dave Tolerus, who mentioned that this was not going to be a major or super El Nino, that it was going to also probably peak sometime during this month or early December, and then also weaken rapidly. Now, Mr. Nawaju is indicating that, and he says that as the El Nino weakens rapidly for the rest of the winter, it will be a very frigid winter, especially rivaling. I don't know about this, Joe, but he's saying that this could turn out to be, with the weakening El Nino, a very frigid winter, which would rival that of the winter of 77, 78 analog, which would be the best for this winter season. At least that's what his opinion is that we could have something that could rival. And of course, 77, 78 was the year when we had not one but 2 massive snowstorms that hit the tri-state area, one on the 20th of January, and 17 days later, the infamous blizzard of 78. I know a lot of you would love to see a repeat of that. Whether or not we do see something like that this, during the course of this winter is still yet to be seen.
Right, we will know in the fullness of time.
Yes.
And here's our system going out tonight. You see the heavy rains. Then after that, there's a second cold front that sneaks through here Thursday night that you could barely, it's barely there. I mean, it's just more of a wind shift than anything else. But you have this large cold high that comes down from Western Canada into the plains and upper Midwest, and that brings that cold air that Joe talked about for Saturday. Kind of holds that cold air in to some extent on Sunday as a low sneaks up the coast, and you got another front that's coming in from the west. But again, the trough axis is too far east, so all the development with the low happens out in the Atlantic. And then, of course, we get a colder shot that comes in for next week, and then once again another reinforcement of sorts, a little diver there on Thursday. You see the low up in northwest PA that starts to reform well offshore. Again, another axis that's too far east, but I just want to keep an eye on that in case it decides to make a dive further to the west. And as the long range on the CPC indicates, it's if you look at this, I mean, this does imply that it's going to be pretty dry for the next couple of weeks
Right.
with these systems because you've got cold air and a northwest flow, and that's all fine and dandy, but it's hard to get moisture involved if the Atlantic is shut off or the storm tracks are too far south, because here you've got systems that are sort of moving across the Gulf states, but not making the turn northward. But it does have the snow for me there, Joe, on the 384 hour in northeast Georgia. Just wanted
Oh
to point,
well.
I'll put the watch up now.
That was the problem in 72, 73. Formerly the record lowest snowfall for Central Park, which was beaten last year, but 2.8 inches for the 72, 73 winter season. And that was the problem. It was too much cold air. We had lots of cold air, plenty of it to make snow, but it was too cold, too dry, and a lot of the storms that hit that winter passed to our south. I mean, as I said, I was a big snow maven back then, and my eyes are rolling around and around back then. I used to tune in AccuWeather on 1010 winds at like every on the half hour. They would have not a weather forecast, but a weather discussion.
Right.
And back then they had Joel Myers and Dr. Joe Sobel and Elliot Abrams, and they'd say the same thing. Well, it's going to be a big snowstorm for Delaware or Maryland,
right,
or
all south.
Or North Carolina, but we will see a couple of flurries. That's about it.
Those were probably years. Though there was about a 17-year stretch. I have to go back and reread the piece that I read from in the 70s into the in the 70s and early 80s, where the NAO was mostly negative during the winter time, but the problem was that it was always it was too negative, and everything got suppressed south. So you could always have that problem.
I just want to hold up this. This is not the Farmer's Almanac, and it's not the old Farmer's Almanac. It's an almanac for New York City, and this is for the year 2024. And it's available from Abbeville Press, 655 3rd Avenue by Grand Central Terminal. And the only reason why I'm pointing this out is that they have their own like long range forecast, but they also have interesting weather statistics. Here's some this is exactly what Joe and I have been talking about when we were much younger and we were like starved for snow. Listen to this, Joe. New York City in the 1970s and 1980s saw few heavy snowfalls. In fact, only 6 times in the 1970s and 5 times in the 1980s at Central Park were there winters when snowfalls of 6 or more inches took place. However, in the 1990s, there were 11 storms of a half a foot or more, and that number rose to 13 in the 2000s and 18 in the 2010s. And they also include in the 2010s 3 storms that dumped 20 inches or more, including an unheard of 2 in 1 year, February 25 to 27 and December 26, 27, 2020. 2020? Is that no, 2010.
2010.
So from like we were down in the 70s and 80s, and then a slow climb upward during the 90s, and then all of a sudden we've reached like parts unknown in terms of snowfalls. I mean, so this is for all of you out there who cry or yell at us.
You were spoiled You were spoiled for 20 years. Just in terms of quirks and statistics along those lines, I once did a I did it by decade in New York City. So the 70s, 80s, and 90s were the three least snowiest decades in the records that go back to 1869.
Right,
The 70s were the third least snowiest. Okay. The 80s were the second least snowiest.
right,
And the least snowiest decade, and that's with the record snowfall that fell in 95 and 96 was the 90s, believe it or not.
mm,
So because in two of those winters, there was only two winters in that 10-year stretch, 93, 94, and 95, 96, that were above normal. All the
yeah.
other ones were significantly below normal. And when I say significantly below normal, I'm talking like 12 inches or less. Okay. So that's how the numbers came out. So actually, if we have average snowfall for the rest of this decade, okay, when they redo the normals in 2030, the snowfall normals in New York City are actually going to go up because this decade will replace the least snowiest decade on record. So we had
Right,
our snowfall normals go up from 20 to 25 to 30, which is the long-term average, just under 30. Okay, if you average all the years, it comes out to 28, 25, 28.9, I think, or 29.5, something like that. But if you when you take out the 90s, if we just get normal snowfall on average going forward from now through the end of this decade, uh, the normals in New York City are actually going to rise because the least snowiest decade is going to come out of the calculation. So that's just another interesting way of looking at it.
but I mean, look at this. As I said, quoting this fact here, in the 1980s there were only 5 snowstorms in that entire decade at Central Park where 6 or more inches of snow fell. And then we go to the 2010s, 2010 to 2020, 18, almost 4 times as many 6 inches, including again 2010, where they had two 20-inch. I mean, can you imagine if we had, if somebody had told us that in 1973, Joe, or 70 in the 70s, that sometime down the road you're going to have not one but two 20-inch snowstorms in a single it
Yeah,
was
that's the 20 inches have definitely become much more common.
yes,
They were very rare before 2000. You rarely saw anything over 17 or 18, with a couple of exceptions, of course, the 47 storm and maybe a few others. But they were spread out.
right.
They were spread out. You'd get one and then you wouldn't see one for like 20 years. Uh, yeah, the 2000 to 2020 period was a bonanza, and unfortunately, I worked most of those. So
I will tell you one of the scariest times on the road for me. Maybe you remember this. It was a Saturday, and it was the day before New Year's Eve. I think it was I think it was yeah, it was 2000, December 30th, 2000. It was a Saturday, and New York City picked up like a foot of snow. They called me up. I got called in to. I didn't. I never worked on Saturdays, but they said we need somebody to cover the weather on Saturday morning. We didn't do weather on Saturday mornings at News 12 back then, so I got stuck, and I was still living on Long Island. So I had to drive from Levittown, Long Island to Yonkers, and already there had been like 4 or 5 inches of snow on the ground when I headed on out. And I got to tell you, that was a scary thing. That was a white knuckle event going from Nassau County over the Throgs Neck Bridge onto I-95, and then where I worked at News 12 Westchester, there was like a hill. It was Executive Boulevard. I don't know how many of you know Westchester County, Lower Westchester, Executive Boulevard, and it was a hill that I had to climb upwards to get to where News 12 was. And I see, I'm driving, I'm looking at this hill, still semi unplowed, and I'm saying to myself, I'm going to get stuck. I'm going to get stuck. Somehow I made it, but that was Thank God I don't have to do anything like that anymore. I
I
really
know.
that's
I feel the same way. I felt that way for a long, long time.
that was the worst feeling when you knew that there was a big storm either coming or was already here, and you get that phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning saying you got to come in, and you look out the window and it's raining or snowing to beat the band. Don't have to do that anymore. And Craig Allen, God love you. Craig Allen works 5 days a week on CBS News Radio. Now he's working at Channel 2 on weekend mornings, Saturday and Sunday mornings. I don't know how he does it. Day
I don't
after
know
day
why he does it.
without a break
No,
or
no, no.
whatever.
I don't know why he does it. Is how you should say it.
Yeah. Well, whatever reason he does it, and
Pad the pension.
yeah, exactly,
Pad the pension.
exactly.
Briller Jeopardy. Let's get going.
Oh, you want to do Briller Jeopardy?
Yeah,
I figured I
let's
would hold off until tomorrow
no,
night.
let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. Well, then now I have to go over to Facebook again. Hang on. Want to make the chairman happy. The chairman gets very upset some nights when I don't do Briller Jeopardy after he's sent it to me. And
72 likes, by the way. Thank you for those of you who hit the like button tonight. And if you haven't and you like the show, please hit the like button because there's always that chance we can go over 100. That just makes Joe and I very happy.
Yeah. So, hi, Joe. We'll continue the series on lowest temperatures in each state. We'll start with Montana. The coldest temperature ever recorded in Montana, Joe.
Minus 67.
You are close, but unfortunately not cold enough.
I took a shot. Let's see. We've got a minus 81. I got to just move this to see what it is. Michael Lazara says minus 81. Anthony says minus 70.
And that's it.
Minus 70.
At Rogers Pass, Montana, 70 degrees below zero.
And Christopher Bear and William Uber, first runners, tied for first runner-up at minus 69.
That's right.
And
so
that means if I were to block Michael Lazara off the channel, you both of you would become the winner of the Mr. Universe pick. Well, I can't even say that because there's women that watch our show. Never mind. It was a Bob Barker reference. Just go ahead. Next.
How about Oshkosh B'gosh? That's
Wisconsin.
No, it's actually it's Nebraska. But Oshkosh, Nebraska had the coldest temperature in the state. What was that cold temperature?
I'll say minus 60.
Too cold.
Okay. Leon Brabitsky says minus 46.
Leon is so close. I mean, if it were a snake, you'd bite him.
So Alan Rupa says minus 43. So it's either minus 47. Craig Carlberg says minus 48.
That's a little bit too warm.
And therefore, that leaves the one in between. Could it be minus 47?
Yeah, it could be. Could be.
Could be.
It's 47 in Nebraska, Oshkosh, Nebraska. So how about Nevada? And I'll even tell you the place, San Jacinto. Or maybe it's Jacinto.
Jacinto. The J is silent.
Jacinto.
Sometimes you get those Arctic air masses that come down in the west and they really get, I don't know, I'll take a shot here. I'll say minus 35.
Not cold enough.
Really? Michael Lazara says, okay, Michael, I guess he's saying minus 62. Alan Rupa minus 52. Anthony minus 38.
The minus 52 was very close.
The minus 52 was very close. Okay. How about Craig Carlberg's minus 50?
Craig Carlberg hits it on the nose with minus 50.
So you owe a half a dollar. Minus 50.
I do.
Minus 50.
Okay. All right.
What's next?
Next one is New Hampshire. And I'm going to give you a big hint here. It's not a ground level. It's Mount Washington. So what is the coldest temperature ever recorded on Mount Washington? Now, last year, I think it was last winter, they had the coldest wind chill.
Right.
something like minus 100 and something.
Right.
But this is not wind chill. This is actual ambient air temperature.
I don't know, minus 75.
Cold, but too cold.
Too cold. Okay. Um, William Uber
I
says
see.
minus 66. David minus 62 from Dave Carter.
Still too cold.
Leon Probitsky minus 59.
Michael Azara minus 48. You're pretty close.
Michael Fazera minus 48.
Latex Street minus 98. No.
No.
I don't think any part of North America has ever been as cold as minus 98. You're talking like Antarctica with that kind of.
So minus 48 is too cold, you said.
Yeah. Bella Lugosi is very close
at minus 49.
Yes. And so is Chuck Cardillo.
So what is it? Minus 50?
Minus 50. Just like in San Jacinto, New Hampshire, Mount Washington, minus 50 degrees. Last one tonight, New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Now, the place in question in New Jersey is Rivervale. Why do I suspect that Rivervale is in Sussex County?
All right.
It would have to be. That's the only place that really gets frigid.
Well, the thing is, so Brookhaven's all-time low is minus on Long Island is 23 below zero, set after the 1961, January 22nd, 1961 snowstorm. So, because they get radiation up there with snow cover. It could go off the wall. I'll say minus 35.
Oh, Joe. Another case of the snake biting you.
All right, so then it's minus 36 or minus 34.
Right.
So I'll say minus 34.
Minus 34 is right. And Rivervale, New Jersey.
Now, for all of New York State, all right, for all of New York State, I will say it's either Saranac Lake or Old Forge, one of those two. And I want to say minus 54. Okay? And I will even give you, I think it was...
Was it February of 1979?
Yes.
Yeah,
right before the President's Day storm.
Right. I
That's
remember
Sunday.
That.
So that was February. It was the morning of February 18th, which is the Sunday.
Right.
So that's my if New York were on the list, that's what I would have said. Minus 54, either Old Forge or Saranac Lake, and it was February 18th, 1969. So I'm gonna have to Google that and check.
79.
79. I'm sorry.
Right.
All right. Well,
Julia Hernandez says, how do they remember these details? This was our life. This has been our life, Cecilia. And I mean, we, like I said, we more often than not, Joe and I go back over 40 years, and there are some things that just stand out in our memories. Like tomorrow, for example, all of you of a certain age will remember exactly where you were at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when you may have found out that at that time or shortly thereafter that President Kennedy was shot. Everybody remembers that. That's like a catalyst in your mind and your memory. Joe, I was in Mrs. Quinn's second grade class when she came running in.
Mrs. Quinn gets more airtime on this show. Mrs. Quinn, if she only knew how infamous she was.
I was using my Think and Do book.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
The Think and Do book, and all of a sudden she comes running into the classroom, tells us to stop what we're doing and pray because.
Did she put out her cigarette before she came into the classroom?
But the one thing, and this is true, and you remember this, Joe, because you went to the same Catholic school I did, Holy Rosary. Every classroom, in the center of the classroom, right above the blackboard, was a portrait of President Kennedy because he was the first Catholic.
Yeah, that's right.
And I remember after she said the president was shot, I raised my hand to be polite, and she looked at me and she pointed at me, and I pointed to the picture of President Kennedy. I said, President Kennedy? And she just shook her head, yes, like, And the other thing I remember about that day, I lived right next door to Holy Rosary Church, literally right next door. So I'm walking back home, and at the church, they were hitting the bell, bong. It was a and they did it every single minute, bong,
That was a
bong.
loud bell. Now, so people know this because we have this weird connection, he and I. So you live next door to Holy Rosary Church on 119th Street,
Right.
right? So I lived uh, on on the corner, well, not quite the corner, but just in from the corner of 119th Street and Second Avenue. So I,
Okay.
I lived a block away from where Joe lived. Okay, didn't know each other. I mean, clearly, because he's 3 years older than me, and I was only four at the time, so I wasn't even in the school yet. But yeah, it was. That's how close. And then when he moved to the Bronx, we moved to the Bronx, and then we wound up being like less after we wound up being a half a mile from each other. But we didn't meet until till college, so that was that, and
And the thing that
we've been
really,
attached at the hip ever since.
7 years old, and the thing that was annoying to me, at least initially, was no
Cartoons.
cartoons,
That's one of
nothing.
my earliest memories, by the way, is I still remember switching channels, okay, and there were no cartoons because every channel was carrying the funeral. And at the time, CBS still, ran network programming during the morning hours, and they carried I Love Lucy, where it was always on from 10 a.m. to 10:30. And that was like every day. That's what we watched in my house as a little kid,
Right.
and that wasn't on.
That
But I,
wasn't
I I
on.
remember it was no cartoons, and it was so I have memories of me changing the channel and channel. And everything was the same.
Well, here's the thing, though, and you may remember this now when I bring it up to you. Channels 2, 4, and 7, ABC, CBS, NBC, they had uh, news bureaus, they had news networks. They were on constantly, telling you what was happening with it. But if you switch to the independent channels, 5, 9, and 11, all you had were static shots. Like if you turn on channel 5, you had endless views all through the day of the Washington Monument. Or on channel 11, you may saw the Jefferson Memorial
Right.
because they didn't have news bureaus.
They took still shot pictures from UPI that were sent over by fax or by messenger, and then just shot it on a camera. Because
Right.
that was the technology in those days.
That was it. And I it was eventually I got into it on Monday when they had the state funeral. I watched, and my grandmother, in fact, called up to ask if is Joseph watching this. The part about the flag when they were at Arlington, and they folded the armed services people folded the flag that was over the casket of President Kennedy, and they did it so majestically. And later on, after my parents divorced, and we moved in with my grandparents. My grandfather got a giant flagpole, got a flag, and every time we took the flag down, we had to fold the flag. I had to fold the flag exactly the way my grandmother said, "I'm going to take you to Arlington one day. We're going to go to Washington and see Arlington Cemetery," because she moved to tears by this whole thing. And I remember, and finally in 1971, we went and we saw the tomb of the unknown soldier, and how one soldier just stands there at attention for hours, just watching over the tomb. If you've never done that, if you've never gone to D.C. and you've never been to Arlington, that's something I strongly recommend that you do go to. And again, all of this from memory, 60 years ago, tomorrow is when, in this person's opinion, we the whole climate of this country changed with the assassination of President Kennedy. It's very, very sad.
Yes, it was. Cecilia Hernandez mentions that um, I Love Lucy was on Channel 5. That was years later. In the
Yeah,
early 60s, it was still on CBS through the early part of the 60s
right.
because they still own the rights to the show. And yes, Brandon Doherty, I'm well aware. That's actually was Channel 8 in New Orleans, WVUE. There's a 5-second video of me doing it. I had gorgeous blonde hair, and of course, it was my natural color. Just so you know, um, every other week. Anyhow, yes. Anyone, Bella Lugosi, anyone remember teletype machines? Oh, good God, yes.
Oh
We used to
God.
have a program. A teletype machine costs, and all it did was print out, whatever was sent over on, to it on wires, on big, fat telephone pole size wires, okay?
Right.
I mean, these huge cables. So if you wanted one in your house, it would cost you like $10,000 a month. And this was 1960. 1960s $10,000, which, if you made $10,000 a year in 1960, you actually could live pretty decently.
Right.
But obviously inflation, numbers change. But think about the fact that how we do things now with what we have and how it used to be done and how much it cost to do and how much it costs now. And it's just it's incredible that we're able to do the things we do. And who knows where we're going to be 10 years from now with
Right.
all of this.
I just hope I'm going to still be here 10 years from now.
Well, you better be, because if you go, I go.
Andy Gregorio, a mutual friend of ours, we were at the weather service that we worked at in sometime in the early '80s. We were there on New Year's Eve, and we were there at midnight. And I remember on our arcane teletypes, for whatever reason, we had all of them on: Circuit A, Circuit C, Raywalk, and all of a sudden at midnight, all the bells were ringing on all three teletypes. Ding, 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 ding. Oh, God.
Those were the days, happy times, but they're long gone. And so are
Yeah.
the people that lived in those times that we remember too, which we would
My
tell you.
God, that's my God, 1980. That was 43 years ago.
I know, I
Oh.
know. And the carnival barker is still there. And on that note, before this really goes down into the sinkhole of gasbaggery, the the Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. It makes a wonderful holiday gift, especially if you've got science-minded youngsters. They actually have some science um, directed kits that they sell that you know give them to the youngins, and it gets them involved in math and science, and that's a good thing. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. Tempest is an affiliate of the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Use the coupon code I want a weather station. If you do, you'll get
10% off. I got to tell you also, I had a weather station when I was a kid. It was from Edmund Scientific. I don't know how many of you remember Edmund Scientific. They still are around, but they're not the same company as they were back then. And Joe, my barometer was a tin can with a long plastic tube, and you had to fill the can up with colored water, and it actually would go up and down, you know, based upon the change in barometric pressure. But I mean, like, how arcane was that compared to what you can get now? A beautiful weather station or a weather kit for young people from Tempest. So I would strongly urge you to do that. I would assume you're not going to get a tin can if you purchase a weather station or weather instrumentation from Tempest.
Cecilia Hernandez says, will artificial intelligence be used in weather forecast, in weather prediction? Well, considering some of the people that are out there doing it now, I would say it's already here.
Yes.
Joe, you would not argue that point.
I'm not going to argue it. What I will say is thank you to the chairman, Scott Briller, for hitting the tip jar not once but twice tonight, and of course also supplying the questions for our Briller Jeopardy, and also Brandon Doherty and Quiet John, who always remains in the background, who also hit the tip jar tonight.
Okie dokie. I think Scott said that Old Forge at 52 below was the number, not 54, but 52. But I was darn close.
Yes.
And I do remember the date. All right, it's coming up on 9 o'clock. I got to go watch Forensic Files and see you know, the next murder that they solve with a piece of thread. They get a piece of thread and they're able to figure out who the killer is. It's amazing. All right, have a great night, folks. We'll see you tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Night night. And we had
Night, night.
100 likes too, that which was really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Night
Thank you.
night.